In the last content, we discussed the different motivations for the outbreak of the First World War, which lasted from 1914 to 1918. With the end of this war, the world went through 2 decades of relative peace and, above all, of reconstruction from the damage caused by the Great War. This brief era of peace became known as the interwar period. It is clear and evident that the events of the First World War were decisive for the sequence and outbreak of the Second World War. In other words, the Second World War would not have happened without the First. Therefore, it is inevitable to discuss the consequences of the First World War to understand the motivations for the Second. One of the main outcomes of the First World War was the Treaty of Versailles, enacted in 1919 and coming into force in January 1920, imposing a series of sanctions, especially on Germany, the last nation defeated in the Great War. Among the main sanctions was the loss of territories such as Alsace-Lorraine, which Germany had conquered during the Franco-Prussian War in 1871 and returned to France. Germany also lost territories it had conquered over the years, which were returned to countries such as Belgium, Czechoslovakia, Denmark, Lithuania, and Poland. Moreover, Germany, already struggling with natural challenges from the post-war reconstruction required after its defeat, had to compensate the victorious countries with 29 billion gold marks, equivalent to $7 billion at the time. This amount had to be paid to both England and France. Another Versailles sanction was the prohibition of a territorial union between Germany and Austria, an old dream of forming a greater German-speaking nation. Finally, and not least, the Treaty of Versailles imposed a series of military restrictions on Germany. Germany could not have a navy or air force. It was also prohibited from possessing tanks, heavy artillery, submarines, and warplanes. Its army was limited to 100,000 men, and the Rhineland region, border with France, was to remain demilitarized. These heavy sanctions contributed to Germany facing a decade of social and economic chaos during the 1920s. They also fostered, among nationalist leaders and a significant part of the population, a kind of revenge sentiment against the countries that proposed the treaty, especially France, which, in the German view, had exaggerated and abused its demands. This German revanchism fueled the strengthening of pan-Germanist ideas, which already existed during the First World War, but gained new proportions with the creation of the National Socialist German Party and Hitler's rise to power in 1933. The frustration of countries like Italy, which originally belonged to the Triple Alliance, composed of Germany and Austria, but switched sides in 1915, expected greater recognition for its participation alongside the Triple Entente, but only received the Italian Tyrol, Trentino, and Trieste under Austro-Hungarian control. However, Italy hoped to gain control of Dalmatia, located today between Croatia, Bosnia, and Montenegro and Ethiopia, under Italian rule in the 19th century. These refusals caused a sense of betrayal by France and England against the Italians. This sentiment catalyzed the emergence of revengeful and totalitarian ideas, bringing Mussolini's fascism to power in 1922. The imperialist ambitions of Japan in the Chinese region of Manchuria also became an important factor, especially for the participation of this key Axis member, a diplomatic and military alliance composed of Germany, Italy, and Japan, which led the global dichotomy proposed by the Second World War. Accompanying this movement, the ultranationalism of these nations and the inherent racism led to the creation of eugenic theories aimed at maintaining a pure race within these countries and expanding their territories to regions with cultural ties or economic strategic importance. The first of these movements was Italian fascism, led by Benito Mussolini, which greatly inspired the emergence of German Nazism, led by Adolf Hitler. Anti-Semitism was a shared element between both totalitarian and dictatorial movements, blaming Jewish merchants and bankers for the economic situation in their respective countries. The hostility toward Jews also had deeper theological roots. Historically, Jews were seen as the ones who handed Jesus Christ over to the Romans. Given that Germany and Italy were predominantly Christian, Lutheran, and Catholic respectively, this became a catalyzing factor. The social problems caused in these countries, especially in Germany, the nation that suffered the most from the consequences of the First World War, allowed Hitler to rise to power as a response to the dictates of the Treaty of Versailles. Slowly, Hitler began to dismantle the treaty, rebuilt the German economy by heavily investing in the armament industry, and promoted nationalist propaganda, fostering sentiments of belonging, eugenics, and pan-Germanism. He annexed Austria, his homeland, to Germany, even though such a move was prohibited by Versailles. Finally, the ineffectiveness of the League of Nations, a global organization created to intervene for world peace and prevent another great war, resulted in the outbreak of the Second World War. Germany's military and imperialist campaigns, which included annexing Austria and reclaiming territories in Czechoslovakia and Lithuania, were observed cautiously by the League of Nations. The situation became unsustainable after Germany invaded Poland on September 1, 1939. In response, France and England, which had a defense agreement with Poland, declared war on Germany 2 days later, thus beginning the Second World War. Germany's diplomatic treaties with Italy and Japan became critical, especially after its invasion of France, creating the alliance known as the Axis powers. Italy joined the war in 1940, followed by Japan in 1941. The Axis also received support from other nations, such as Bulgaria, Croatia, Hungary, Romania, and Slovakia. Initially formed by England, France, and Poland, the Allied powers evolved after the invasions of France and Poland to include England, the United States, the Soviet Union, and China as its main members. The outcomes of the Second World War left a legacy of material and immaterial destruction, marking it as the deadliest war in human history. It brought forth dangerous, extremist ideas that challenged peaceful coexistence among nations, leaving deep scars on humanity's history during and after the conflict. But that is a topic for another video.